welcome to today's edition of Upper Bowl Perspective, a Utah Jazz podcast dedicated to showing that the fans in the nosebleeds can know just as much as those sitting courtside. I'm today's host, Kyler Sparrow, joined by my devilishly handsome co-hosts, J.R. Hunsaker.
Happy to be here.
And Caleb Walker.
Thanks for the compliment, KB.
Oh, you know it's true. All right, well, it's been a minute since we've last recorded the podcast, and needless to say, a lot has happened since then. Since we're not getting paid, 4th of July weekend kind of was a little bit rough to get a recording in, but I think it is helpful a little bit because we can get away from some of the recency bias of the signings a little bit. We can get away from some of the overreactions and just talk about the things that the Jazz have done and the other teams in the NBA have done, and talk about it maybe a little bit without that huge overreaction period. So, to start off, instead of just going right into what the Jazz did this offseason, let's just talk a little bit about the offseason in general and the moves that most impacted the Jazz. Jay Bobby, what was a move that stood out to you that's going to directly affect what the Jazz are going to need to do to win this next season?
I think the very obvious one is both Kawhi and Paul George joining the LA Clippers. It's been everywhere. Everyone's been talking about it, and for very good reason. The Clippers are now the front runners for winning the entire championship next year. They have two top 10 players in their forward positions, along with arguably the best player in the world right now, Kawhi Leonard. They're going to be an absolutely crazy deep team. They're going to be a great offensive team, and they have two-way superstars. One thing that I got really excited about is that after the Jazz signed Bojan Bogdanovic, I actually thought the Jazz had one of the best forward duos in the NBA with Joe Ingles and Bojan. And now looking at the Clippers and thinking about that matchup of Kawhi and Paul George versus Bojan and Joe Ingles, it makes me a little bit nervous. I think it's going to be a very difficult matchup for the Jazz. And as much as I love Joe Ingles and as much as I'm excited for Bojan, I think the Clippers are definitely the one to beat, and they're going to be the most difficult matchup for the Jazz to take on this season.
Well, we know Joe Ingles is going to neutralize Paul George. We've seen it in the past. So really, it's just Kawhi that we have to worry about. What about you, Caleb?
Just Kawhi.
Just Kawhi.
I mean,
that's not too bad.
Nothing. Like J.R. said, I think that's the main move. News just broke that might make our lives a little easier, actually, that Chris Paul has been traded to OKC. And Russell Westbrook is going to the Rockets, which we have two of the most ball-dominant guards in the league on the same team. So I am intrigued to see how this is going to work out. I think it's going to be quite entertaining, actually, and made Houston not as good, I think. It's scary because, we can't count on old Chris Paul to break down in the playoffs anymore, and Russ can kill us sometimes, and we've seen that. But I just think it's going to be impossible for them to coexist, those two stars there. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that affects our nemesis, the Rockets, quite. It affects them a lot.
Yeah, this is really fresh news, like you're talking about. So we haven't had a lot of time. Maybe we are in that overreaction, recency bias period that we just tried to avoid. But I do agree. I don't know if that makes the Rockets easier or harder for us next year. I just know that the clear emphasis and the point of this offseason for me is just the West in general. After the fall of this Warriors dynasty, everybody's going in. I can only think of 3 teams in the entire West that aren't trying to win this year. And the Timberwolves are kind of in the middle of that. But there are at least 11 teams in the West that think they have a legitimate shot at being really good this season. You've seen even the teams like the Mavericks and the Kings, who we've thought have sucked for the last few years. Everybody's trying to make win now moves, and the West is just going to be a gauntlet. It's almost every single night we're going to be going up against people that are not in this tank mode that the good teams like us like to play. Have a little bit of a night off, but that's just not going to happen in the West this year. Everybody thinks they have a shot and they're going for it.
Yeah, even the Pelicans, who they traded, you'd think after they trade their superstar that they're not going to be that good anymore, but they got a huge haul, drafted Zion, got Derek Favors, they're going to be not easy either. And just like it's
Yeah, you
gonna
don't
be
you
a
don't
change.
sign JJ Redick if you're planning on winning 15 games. Next year, so.
And I think it's really interesting that I think depth is going to matter more than any other year in the Western Conference. Because beforehand, there's always been like 3 or 4 teams that you know are going to be duking it out to see who's actually going to be the Western Conference representative in the NBA Finals. And this year, where you got so many teams who you could make an argument that that could be them, I think it's going to be interesting to see how these different teams try to manage how many minutes guys are playing, and also how influential bench players are going to be because people are going to get hurt. We don't know exactly where those injuries are going to occur yet, but I think it's going to be so interesting to see how night in and night out, where it's just going to be a bloodbath in the West, to see which teams are actually going to have the very key rotational players who are going to have to step up and play well if their team's going to have a shot.
Yeah, for sure. And just, in an era of small ball, I think I saw a lot of teams that tried to get big. I mean, obviously the outlier is the Philadelphia 76ers, who their second shortest player is going to be 6'9" next year in their starting lineup. But I think, I think the small ball movement was so much to counter the Warriors that now that the Warriors have fallen, a lot of teams are going back to size, because size is something in basketball has always been an advantage. And so I think it's really interesting how the NBA landscape has changed. But
we got to watch out for the Knicks. I mean,
yeah,
signing 4 power forwards?
Yeah.
Like Marcus Morris goes. So
the Knicks
they're gonna be
have cornered the market on power
devastating.
forwards. You can demand a hefty price. They have all of them.
Whenever I'm having a rough day and I feel like I'm not very smart, I just remember that the Knicks pay people to make their decisions, and I feel a lot better about myself.
Just to be a fan of like both the Giants and the Knicks after the off seasons for both this isn't a football podcast, but like it's poor people over there. I'm so glad that we have such a well-run team here in Utah. So let's talk about what this well-run team has done this offseason. I think the big acquisition, obviously, is that of Bojan Bogdanovic. We basically used all of the space that we were able to acquire by trading Derek Favors to sign this guy. And he does make us a little bit smaller, right after I said that small ball is dying a little bit. But what is the main change that the Jazz are trying to accomplish in their identity with this acquisition? We're talking about basically going from Favors to Bojan Bogdanovic. What's the biggest change? What sign are the Jazz trying to tell us in the league that they're trying to make their identity this season?
I think that they are making offense more of a priority. Not a priority because we know that Dennis Lindsey, his priority is defense, and offense will come. But we've seen too many times where our offense just dies and we can't score to save our lives. That's been the thing that's been holding the team back, is our lack of offense. And I think that adding Bojan obviously spreads the floor, and add the addition of Mike Conley spreads the floor as well. So Dennis Lindsey is saying, we're going to give space to our guys. They can't triple team Donovan every time he has the ball because no one else can shoot. And this is going to just create lanes galore. Bojan and Ingles in each corner, and Donnie and Mike running the show up front. And I think it's just Dennis Lindsey is addressing the need that we saw so blatantly, especially in the last playoff series against the Rockets. We just couldn't keep up to score with them. We were doing good on defense, but we just couldn't score enough. So I think he was addressing the main weakness that we had.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Kate. I mean, historically, the teams that win the finals, and it's very obvious that that's what the Jazz are trying to do this year, is to win a championship. You almost always need a top 5 offense and a defense to be able to win. And the Jazz have been a top 5 defense here for the past few years. They've been known as a very solid defensive team, but we haven't been a top 5 offense. We haven't even really been close to that. And now that we have Bojan, who's able to really help us stretch the floor, who's able to hit the 3 ball, who's a very efficient scorer overall, along with the great addition of Mike Conley that we've already talked about in depth, we can see the reality that the Jazz could not only continue to be a top 5 defense, but that they could also make that transition from being maybe a top 8 to 10 offense to closer to that 4 or 5 range. And I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's now actually possible, because with Derek Favors, it was never possible. With Bojan, it is.
Yeah, when I scouted Boyan and looked at who he is as a player, he reminded me a little bit of, I don't want to get too crazy, he's not an exact match, of like what Gordon Hayward did for the Jazz as far as a point forward, a forward who can handle the ball, who can shoot off the dribble, who can pass. I think he's just a guy that's going to be able to come in every night and just fill the role that you need. He went from a complimentary player in Indiana to, as soon as Victor Oladipo went down, he was able to take the reins for a good chunk of that season. So I think he's a guy that, he's going to be able to hand off his duties if Donovan and Mike are just going off. But if one of them's injured or just shooting 20%, because we know that Donovan occasionally shoots 20%, that I think Boyan's just going to be able to just light it up. He is one of the most inconsistent shooters, but when he's on, he is really difficult to stop, and that's just somebody that the Jazz haven't really had. Like our closest guy on a consistent basis for us has been Joe Ingles. So I think he's just gonna be able to light it up for the Jazz, just because we have so many people that can both create for themselves and for others. That, like Caleb said, no, but I don't think not only Donovan's not gonna be able to get the defensive attention he's been getting, but Mike Conley's been by far the number one option for the majority of his career. Bojan Bogdanovic last year was the mainly guarded guy for a good chunk of last year as well. So I think everybody's helping everybody out. But the one thing that maybe is a little bit worrisome is just maybe some size and some defensive ability against the forwards like and Paul George. That's the thing that I've been hearing the most. What do you guys think of these doubts that have been said about maybe the Jazz not being able to guard the upper level forwards because of a lack of size?
I think it's a valid concern. I mean, Bojan isn't known for being a great defensive player. He's not known for being a defensive liability by any means, but just in the film that I've watched of him and seeing him play, he's a better perimeter defender than he is in the paint. And so the guards that can drive, like Kawhi Leonard, like Paul George, those really elite level guards, I think it's going to be very difficult for Bojan to be able to guard them effectively. I think that does put a lot more pressure on Rudy because he's going to have to pick up some of the slack there. I think we've seen that a little bit with Joe Ingles, that sometimes when he's been forced to guard some of those more elite forwards that he struggled keeping them out of the paint as well. And I think we're going to see that with Bojan as well. He does have decent size. He's definitely not ideal, especially if he's going to be playing the power forward position. He is 6'8" with a 6'11" wingspan. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of schemes that Quinn Snyder draws up to try to minimize the risk factor with that, because there is a risk factor there. And there are going to be times where I think Bojan's going to get blown off the dribble or where there's going to be huge lanes open down low and Rudy's trying to guard a good center. So I think there's definitely going to be giving up some points in the paint, but at the same time, I trust Quinn Snyder. If there's anybody who can come up with a plan to try to minimize that risk, it's him. So I'm actually really, really excited to see how these players play together.
Yeah, and I think with his size, Bojan's actually smaller than Joe. And I think what people have come to the consensus is that Bojan's going to play some four, but I think it's how I'd imagine. I don't know if this is exactly the way Quinn's going, but we're moving towards positionless basketball anyway. I think it's going to be they're on the wing. They're the wing guys, and whoever's bigger, Joe is going to guard, because Joe has shown that he can play some four as well. And he's getting a little older, but so is Bojan, and I think that Bojan will probably take more time at the three than the four. There's been rumors that Joe might come off the bench, starting Jeff Green. We'll see what actually ends up happening, but we know that in the end, they will be playing on the floor together. Like, that's going to be the ending lineup, is what it sounds like, is they're both on the floor, and I think Rudy will take care of the paint and allow some of that, help out with some of that slippage that might come from two splash uncles on the wing, but I think it'll be okay. Donovan and Mike aren't the biggest either, but they've proven they can hold their own. They're known to be plus defenders as well. So
yeah, I mean, you're putting a lot of stress on Rudy Gobert, but Rudy Gobert has shown he's the two-time defending Defensive Player of the Year. So if you want to put stress on anybody defensively, he's the guy you want to do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Rudy's going to have to show out, and he's going to have a healthy season for the Jazz to still be as good defensively. Will they be the number one? Maybe not. Will they still be top 5? I do believe there's a pretty good chance. But let's talk about this contract a little bit. So it's a 4-year contract where he's making a little bit over $18 million a year, a little over 70 total over these next 4 years. Like Caleb said, he's getting a little older. He's 30 years old now, so we're talking about a guy that we're going to be paying. He will be 34, and we'll be paying him a hefty contract. Do you guys think that his game translates to still being able to be an asset at the end of this contract, or do you think the Jazz had to get this contract that's going to end up being a negative down the road, but they had to do it in order to get the asset? Now, what do you guys think how this contract, the length, the dollar amount per year, compared to what Bojan's going to be bringing us both now and towards the end of that contract?
I think it will be okay. Bojan, he's like a Joe Ingles-esque person in my mind, where his game will just be his game, and it doesn't rely so much on athleticism. It does now. He provides that creation off the dribble and being able to cut into the lane and drive and create his own shot, but he's an elite three-point shooter. When he's a little less athletic, and with Mike and Donovan, and who knows, well, after 4 years, Mike Conley probably won't be our point guard anymore. But we'll have another younger point guard. We'll have Donovan still young. And I think that he'll still be able to do what we need him to do. He'll still be able to bring that elite shooting. And he probably won't be driving and creating as much on that 4th year. But I think it's worth it to maybe a little bit underpay him right now to what his performance was last year. And we don't know exactly how he'll perform, if he'll come up to that elite standard that he was playing at. But I think on average, it'll be okay. Hopefully. 34 is not too bad.
34 is not terrible.
No.
Forwards age a little bit better than guards.
Yeah.
In our last podcast, we talked about the rightful order of the basketball universe, and like how David Locke brought that up in one of his podcasts. We touched on it a little bit about how important it is that we're not asking players to do what they're not meant to do as basketball players. And I think as long as Bojan is in the rightful order of the basketball universe, he's playing for the Jazz, that he's not expected to do too much or to be overly athletic, kind of like we asked Joe last year to be our secondary scoring option. I think we got Bojan on a great contract as long as we keep him in a good spot and we allow him to do what he does best, which is take threes and to take open shots and to help kind of play make for other people. So without Bojan on our team, we don't have a shot at winning the Western Conference. We're not a good enough team to be able to do that. And if we didn't offer him the 4-year $73 million, then somebody definitely would have. So I think that the contract is fair. I don't think it's going to be an issue unless something major happens to Bojan in the next 4 years. And I still think he's going to be a solid contributor to the Jazz at that $18 million when he's 34 years old.
Yeah, I think maybe by the end, there's people that talk about, are you a net positive asset due to your contract, net negative, or neutral? I think he might slip down to neutral. Right now, he's an asset with that contract. I think he might go down to a neutral, but I don't think he's ever going to be like a burden, like, oh my goodness, the Jazz are paying Bojan Bogdanovic $18 million, because he's still going to be a good shooter no matter what. That ages well. See Kyle Korver, 38 years old, and still stroking them threes. So I think 18's a lot. And will he be worth 18 when he's 34? No, but will he be worth a role in the Jazz? Yes. So I do agree the Jazz needed to do it. I mean, we're talking about getting a guy who's a really good scorer and bringing him to Utah. And, so that's not something that happens a lot. So if you have to, give a guy financial security when he's a little bit older in order to do that, totally worth it for me. So I want to talk about where the Jazz are in the West, but before we do that adequately, we need to talk about the other signings that they did, because not only did they bring in Bojan Bogdanovic, they did some really nice signings that I think give them really good depth. That maybe other than the Clippers, or maybe right along with the Clippers, were the team that boasts that combines both top end talent and really good depth. So each of us kind of took one of these signings. They signed Ed Davis, Jeff Green, and Emmanuel Mudiay, and that's the order that they signed them in. So that's the order that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and just what they bring to the Jazz. Like what role do we see them? What's their skill set and whatnot. So first up with Ed Davis, Caleb, you did a little bit of research on him, right?
Yep, and we'll just do a quick overview, but for those of you who don't know Ed Davis, I think of him like a Rudy Gobert light, emphasis on the light. And he's 6'10", so same height as Faves, but he's 225, so considerably lighter. And for all these rumors, I've been seeing like things all over NBA Twitter and Jazz Twitter, like people asking, is he going to start at the 4, and people debating whether he'll like fit well next to Rudy Gobert. I'm like, children, he's not going to be anywhere next to Rudy Gobert ever. Like, we're bringing him in to be the backup center. He does not shoot threes. I don't think he's shot a 3 in his entire career.
He shouldn't have if he did.
Very true.
Finishes well around the rim, and he's shot like maybe 16 times last year, I think is what I saw, from 5 to 9 feet. So like, he's not shooting outside the paint. He is a pick and roll rim runner, and he will finish around the rim, which is what we need him to do. We're bringing him in to be the backup center, to kill on defense, which he is great at. He's great at offensive rebounds and defensive rebounding. And I think he was the second best rim defender behind Rudy Gobert. So we're not bringing him in to like kill on offense or space the floor or anything, but we're bringing him in to have that consistency on consistency in style. I think is something nice that brings. He's a rim protector and not an offensive guy. He'll do the same thing that Rudy does, even though Rudy has expanded his offensive game. It's a similar style, and he will be great to anchor that second unit. I think he'll provide consistent defense from the starters to the bench. He'll provide consistent style from the starters to the bench, and allow just to play within the same system, which I think helps with continuity and just keeping the flow of the game for the Jazz, because they're a heavy, we'll see how they are now that they have loads of spacing. They were heavily invested in their system before, and I think this is a nice signing within that system to do what they need him to do. And I think that was probably the best thing that we could get with that mid-level, or the room exception that we had. After signing Bojan, knowing that we had some of that wing depth shored up a little bit, I think like doubling down on our backup center and making sure that we got one of the better centers left was just incredibly smart, and I think he fits incredibly well with the system and with the Jazz.
Yeah, I think the Jazz, to me, have a clear identity where they have a lot of shooters, they have athletic shot creators, and then they have a center that's going to rebound at an elite level and protect the rim at an elite level. And Ed Davis is going to give you the option to keep that identity. You know, you had that identity because as soon as Rudy Gobert went out last year, Derek Favors provided elite rebounding and elite rim protection for a second unit guy. And so while not as dynamic as Derek Favors on offense, Ed Davis allows the Jazz to keep that identity. Their defensive system relies so much on a center that can rebound and rim protect at a high level. And so being able to replace Derek Favors with a cheaper version of somebody that can do very similar things, at least on the defensive end, I think was a huge get for the Jazz, and is really going to help them. You know, in case, even if Rudy has to sit out 5 or 10 games due to an injury, Ed Davis is he's an okay guy that's going to be able to start those games because the Jazz are going to be able to keep their identity, although, like I've said, not at the same level. But that's the identity that they want, and they're able to keep that with Ed Davis.
I loved the signing personally. I thought it was a perfect usage of the mid-level exception. I think we sometimes forget that even though Ed Davis is a backup center, he's not a starting center. He is one of the elite rebounders in the league. Like, not just among backups, he's one of the best rebounders in the league, period. Last year, he was playing about 18 minutes a game, and he was getting 9 rebounds a game in those 18 minutes. That's pretty crazy to average that many rebounds in that little bit of playing time. And even though he didn't score a lot, I think he averaged like only 5 or 6 points a game. His field goal percentage was above 60%, so when he is asked to score, they are going to be high percentage looks, and he is going to be able to contribute very, very slightly on offense, but I just love the fact that the Jazz aren't going to have to change when they bring in their backup, because Rudy Gobert is the best player on the Jazz, and to not have to change our system or to really change what we're trying to do as a team when he has to go take a break during a game or if he does get injured. I just like how the Jazz will never really change significantly their play style, because between Rudy Gobert and Ed Davis, we are going to have a solid defensive rim protecting center for 48 minutes a night, which is just a wonderful, wonderful thing to think about.
All right, second guy, Jeff Green. This is a signing that had me super excited when I heard about it. I was a big Jermichael Green guy, but when we already used our mid-level exception, I didn't imagine we could get somebody like Jeff Green with a minimum, like just high-level minimum guys typically don't come to Utah, but we also typically don't have one of the best contenders in the league. Jeff Green, 32-year-old athlete, so that worries you a little bit. Athletes don't age well, but since he hasn't played huge roles in his entire career, he hasn't used up, as much of the hits as somebody like a Russell Westbrook, who's a complete athlete that's also aging. His game projects to deteriorate a lot. So Jeff Green will too, but he's a guy that's going to be a high-level defender at the 4 position. He's not a great shooter from outside, but he's definitely developed a willingness to shoot. When he came into the league, he was basically an athletic 3 who would shoot most of his shots driving and in the mid-range. But he's now shooting almost half of his shots from 3. He's only making 34%, which is below league average. But for a 4, you can't really expect much more than that. Jay was shooting lower than that. Jay was shooting 6 a game. Jeff Green won't shoot quite that many, so a lot of people might actually like that. But he's a guy that had as many dunks as Donovan Mitchell, if I heard correctly, last season. So he's still got a lot of athleticism. He provides a good defender. One of the knocks on him, A, his age, and B, there's been, throughout his career, he just kind of goes in and out. His focus isn't 100% completely there, but he also hasn't been on a lot of truly winning teams. So hopefully the Jazz system and their winning is going to be able to bring out a lot in him. And like you said, Caleb, this guy has a chance to start. If they end up thinking that they want Joe to be the leader of the second unit, this guy might be our starting 4 and on a minimum contract. That's a great value. D. Wade, he vouched for this guy hardcore, said that it makes no sense that this guy has to keep signing 1-year minimums. And I agree. I think Jeff Green's at least like a room exception level player. He provides a lot of things. He was most famous last year, unfortunately, for getting crossed up by Lance Stevenson, but he's had plenty
Still a
of
good defender.
good highlights throughout his career. He's a really good player that I'm really excited about.
I don't really have much to add. I mean, that was basically exactly what my thought process is. I think the fact that we got him for the minimum is a steal. I think he's going to be a great rotational player. He's going to see a lot of minutes, and he adds a lot of security to our lineup. So that's exciting. I think he'll be a great addition to the team.
Got anything about Jeff?
Think you got it.
Awesome.
Just excited.
Yeah.
Very excited.
So the guys that we talked about have been like older guys that are a lot more established, but the Jazz did take a swing, or at least from reports, this guy may have taken a swing on the Jazz more than the Jazz took a swing on him. But we signed Emmanuel Mudiay, who Jay Bobby did a lot of research on him.
Yeah. So I was super excited when I heard that Emmanuel Mudiay was coming to the Jazz. For those of you who don't know a lot about him, he's still young. He's 23 years old, and he's a big point guard. He's 6'5", 200 pounds with a 6'9" wingspan. When he was drafted in the 2015 draft class, he was actually the number 7 overall pick, even though he was only 18 or 19 years old at the time. He was in the same draft classes like Carla, Anthony Towns, Kristaps Porzingis, D'Angelo Russell, and he was actually drafted before guys like Devin Booker and Bobby Portis. So when he was coming into the league, people saw him as a big guard with a ton of potential. He's a very, very athletic guard, but he's really struggled to make an impact in his career. Last year he played for the Knicks, and he's played very, very inconsistent. Yeah, he played for the Knicks. This poor guy is a young player with a ton of potential who had to play for the Knicks of all people. It is almost Shakespearean tragedy at that point that a young player has to play for the Knicks. But out of all the guys that the Jazz that they signed in the offseason, they had a lot of veterans, a lot of people that you know exactly what you're going to get. But Emmanuel Mudiay, I think, is the guy with the highest ceiling. He fills the hole in the roster left by Raul Neto. He's definitely going to be our third point guard behind Mike Conley and Dante Exum. But in looking at his film last year, even though he was a pretty inconsistent player and he struggles on defense, when you look at his highlights, he almost reminds me a little bit of Russell Westbrook. Just a guy that when he has space and when he can play, he is just incredible to watch and to see what he can do when he drives and just the strength and just seeing how he can just dominate in a very powerful way smaller guards. I think he's going to fit extremely well in the Jazz's system. I think he's going to actually, for the first time in his career, actually have a chance to become the player that he has the chance to be, that people saw with the 7th overall pick that he could become. So I don't think he's going to see a ton of minutes this season, but I think we're going to see a player who's struggled his entire career actually have a chance with a solid organization to become a guy who can start in the league.
Awesome. So if I've heard correctly, the Jazz this season have signed Rudy Gobert light, Gordon Hayward light, and Russell Westbrook. So if that doesn't make you excited, I don't know what will make you excited.
From an Upper Bowl perspective.
Yeah, we're making some big time comparisons. We just think the Jazz are full of all-stars, Warriors level all-stars apparently. But that's all we have time for today's episode. I'm glad you guys tuned in. If you liked it, please share with your family and friends. This is a great podcast for those who want something to listen to at work, at home, at the gym, anywhere in between. Signing off, I'm today's host, Kyler Sparrow, joined by my co-host, J.R. Hensaker.
So excited for this season. It's going to be so much fun.
And Caleb Walker.
Can't wait to see Russ and Harden get in a fight over the ball. Can't wait.
Oh, man.
It's going to be awesome. Well, please follow our page on Facebook so you can get the updates on when our new podcasts come out. Right now we're coming out on YouTube, and you can share that link as well to all your friends. It's going to be awesome. See you guys next time.